The day my college acceptance letter came in the mail, I sat alone in the kitchen, hands trembling, staring at the golden crest on the envelope. It had taken months of late-night study sessions, early morning part-time shifts, and quiet prayers, whispered into my pillow when the rest of the house was asleep. I got in. I actually got in. Full ride. The kind of miracle that kids like me don't dare to dream of too often, because life usually doesn't hand those out where I come from. But before I could even feel the thrill of victory, I heard my little brother, coughing again from the other room, that raw, wet sound that always made my stomach twist. My mother's voice followed, tired and hushed, murmuring something to soothe him. My dad hadn't come home from work yet. Another double shift at the mill. He barely slept anymore. None of us did. And suddenly, the letter felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. That night, I didn't tell anyone. I slid the envelope back into my backpack, tucked it between old homework and a worn-out planner. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, my hands folded over my chest, thinking about what would happen if I left. Who would take Miguel to his therapy appointments? Who would make sure Mom remembered to take her pills, or that the bills got paid on time? What would happen when the car broke down again, as it always did, and there wasn't anyone around to call the mechanic or talk the tow truck driver into giving us a discount? The next morning, I sat across from my father at the kitchen table, his eyes bloodshot, his skin the color of dust. I told him I wasn't going. College could wait, I said. My place was here. He didn't say anything for a long time. Just stared into his mug like the coffee might tell him what to say. Eventually, he nodded. "It's your choice," he said quietly. But the look in his eyes didn't match the words. It was relief. He needed me. They all did. I picked up more shifts at the diner, started helping Mrs. Esteban clean houses on weekends. I sold my old guitar, the one I'd saved for since I was 13. I never even told my friends what happened. Most of them left town anyway. Their families had more options, more savings, more backup plans. I had none, but over time, things got weird. The gratitude turned into something else. My sister started making comments, little things, passive jabs. Must be nice to just work and not have to worry about midterms. My mom started saying things like, "Well, if you had gone to college, maybe we'd be in a better place now." As if my sacrifice was some kind of crime, some missed opportunity for them instead of me. And then came the real blow, my cousin's wedding. I hadn't been invited, and I only found out the day before when an aunt accidentally mentioned it. "Oh," she said, eyes wide. "I thought they didn't invite you because, well, you've been kind of distant." I laughed. A dry, cracked thing that didn't sound like me. Distant? I was working 70 hours a week. I was drowning in responsibility. But apparently that made me selfish. I remember standing in the living room that night, holding a basket of laundry, staring at the peeling paint on the wall and wondering when everything had gone so wrong. I gave up everything for them, my dreams, my future, my youth. And somehow I became the villain in their story. I still think about that acceptance letter. I never threw it away. It's tucked into the back of my drawer under the socks I never wear and the photos I don't look at anymore. Sometimes when I'm home alone, I pull it out and run my fingers over the embossed seal, as if touching it can take me back to that moment, before I made the decision, before the guilt and bitterness settled in, before the people I loved the most twisted my love into something selfish. But I didn't do it for a thank you. I did it because I thought love meant showing up when it mattered. I just never imagined that showing up would make me disappear in their eyes. I tried to tell myself that it didn't matter, that their words, their cold shoulders, their bitter glances were just byproducts of stress, or pain, or maybe even misunderstanding. I kept hoping that one day, someone in the house would really see me. Not just see the girl folding clothes, cooking dinner, driving everyone around, or handing over another paycheck, but me, the daughter who stayed, the sister who gave up everything, the one who, despite everything, still hoped for a thank you that never came. It got harder when the younger ones started growing up. Miguel was doing better, thankfully. His breathing wasn't as bad, and his speech therapy was finally paying off. But now he was old enough to ask questions. And sometimes he'd look at me with those big eyes and ask, "Why don't you go to school like the people on TV?" I never knew what to say. How do you explain to a child that you traded your dream so he could have his? And when I'd walk past the living room and see my mom beaming at my sister's nursing school brochures, or hear my dad bragging to the neighbors about how she was the one going places, I'd smile. I smiled so much, my jaw ached. Then came the blow that I didn't see coming. One afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and heard them talking, my parents and my sister. My name came up. I stopped in the hallway, something about the tone twisting my gut. "She just doesn't try anymore," my sister said. "It's like she's fine being stuck here. Maybe she likes being the martyr." "She had potential once," my mother added, and I swear I stopped breathing. "But she made her choice. She gave up too soon." My father didn't say anything, but his silence might have been the loudest of all. I didn't walk in. I backed away like a ghost, like I didn't exist, and somehow that felt more fitting than it should have. My heart didn't break in that moment. It collapsed slowly, like a house giving way to rot, board by board, memory by memory. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea that went cold in my hands, staring out at the street, at the flickering street lamp that buzzed like a bad memory. I thought about running away. Not dramatically, not with a bag over my shoulder and a bus. Ticket to nowhere. Just slipping out quietly. Renting a cheap room in another town, working the same jobs, maybe even worse ones. But at least the silence there wouldn't feel like betrayal. But I didn't leave. I stayed. Not because I still believed I owed them anything, but because leaving felt like another kind of defeat, one they'd never let me forget. Instead, I started pulling back. Bit by bit, I built walls inside myself. I stopped volunteering for everything. I kept my tips instead of putting them in the family jar. I began setting boundaries, small ones at first. "I can't watch the kids tonight. I'm off Sunday. I need it for myself." My sister rolled her eyes. My mom huffed. My dad just looked at me like I'd become a stranger. One night, after dinner, I asked them, "Do you ever think about what I gave up?" The room went quiet. They didn't understand the question, or maybe they didn't want to understand. "You made your choice," my sister said again, like a rehearsed line in a play I never auditioned for. And maybe that was the cruelest part of it all. They truly believed that choosing them had been easy. I think about the girl I used to be. The one who clutched that envelope with trembling hands. The one who whispered her acceptance letter to the stars like a prayer. I think about her dreams, her quiet ambition, her fire. And I wonder when exactly she died. But then sometimes I see her flicker back to life. Like when I take a long walk at night and imagine myself in a different life, in a dorm room surrounded by books and ideas, laughing with people my age, not weighed down by duty. Or when I sit in the back corner of the bookstore on my rare afternoons off and trace the spines of the novels I used to dream of writing. She's still there, somewhere, inside. But I don't know if she'll ever forgive me. I started writing again in secret. Not for anyone else, just for me. Late at night, when the house was quiet and no one needed me, I'd pull out the old notebook I kept hidden beneath a stack of receipts and half-finished crossword puzzles. I wrote about a girl who left. A girl who had nothing but a suitcase and a stubborn kind of hope. She found herself in strange cities, waited tables, made mistakes. But she lived. And each time I scribbled down a new scene, a new piece of dialogue, it was like breathing air after holding it for too long. No one knew about the stories. Not my family, not my few remaining friends, not the coworkers who assumed I was too tired to have hobbies. Writing was the one piece of me they hadn't touched, hadn't labeled or misunderstood. It was the one place where I wasn't selfish or invisible. I was alive. But even that small rebellion came with guilt. Because each moment I spent alone, each second not spent helping, felt like a betrayal. It was like I'd been programmed to believe that my worth depended entirely on what I could give. If I wasn't sacrificing, then I was failing. And when I dared to want anything for myself, the guilt came crashing in like a wave swallowing a swimmer too far from shore. Then came the night my father collapsed. I was in the middle of a double shift, scraping dishes into the trash when my phone rang. My sister's voice was sharp and breathless. "It's Dad. He passed out at work. They're taking him to the ER." I left everything behind. Didn't even clock out. I ran out the back door, apron still tied around my waist, heart pounding like it was trying to escape. I remember the cold of the hospital floor under my sneakers, the sterile air that smelled like metal and something you couldn't quite name, something that made your chest tighten. He was awake, groggy, wired up to monitors, high blood pressure, exhaustion. The doctor said he'd been pushing too hard, working through chest pains for weeks. No one had known, not even Mom. He didn't tell anyone. And somehow, I still blamed myself. I sat by his bed all night, holding his hand while he slept. His fingers were rough, calloused from years of work. I remembered being small, walking beside him, swinging from that same hand, thinking he was the strongest man in the world. When he woke up, he looked at me for a long time, and for the first time in years, I saw regret in his eyes. Not disappointment, not shame, just regret. "I should have never let you stay," he whispered. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just nodded and blinked hard to keep the tears from falling. After that, things didn't magically change. He got better, slowly. Mom started watching over him more closely, but something had shifted. They didn't lean on me quite so heavily. Not all the time, at least. My sister got her license and started driving herself around more. Miguel was growing fast, and his independence came like a gift I hadn't dared to hope for. The house still carried the weight of everything we'd been through, but the weight on my shoulders lightened, just a little. One afternoon, I took a bus to the next town over to visit the community college. I didn't tell anyone. I just walked the campus, watched students spill out of classrooms with notebooks in their hands and dreams on their faces. I sat under a tree near the library and imagined myself among them. Not an outsider, not a failed version of who I could have been, but a student. Just a girl who wanted to learn. That night, I cried in the shower. Quiet, aching sobs I hadn't allowed myself in years. Not because I was sad, but because I had hope. And hope hurt in its own way, like waking up a limb that had been numb for too long. I started researching programs, part-time, online, affordable, flexible. I wasn't sure what I'd study yet. Maybe literature, maybe psychology. Maybe just something that belonged to me. When I finally mentioned it, carefully during dinner, between bites of rice and silence, no one said much. My mom raised her eyebrows. My sister shrugged. My dad looked down at his plate. But Miguel beamed. "I think you'd be really good at that," he said. And that was enough to keep the flame alive. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, I began reshaping the life I had once surrendered. This time not with grand gestures or dramatic exits, but with small, steady acts of defiance against the version of myself that had been defined only by sacrifice. I enrolled in 2 online classes. They were basic, the kind of courses freshmen breeze through without a second thought, but to me, they were everything. Each assignment completed was a silent declaration. I'm still here. I still want something. Balancing work, family, and school wasn't easy. My body still ached from long shifts. My bank account hovered on the edge of empty more often than not. But for the first time in years, I had a reason to stay awake at night that didn't involve worry or panic. It was hope, buzzing like a quiet flame in my chest. Of course, my family didn't really change. Not in the way I had once dreamed they would. My mother still made the occasional passive comment. My sister still acted like her struggles outshone mine. My father, though gentler now, mostly kept his thoughts to himself. The house remained heavy with silence in certain corners, tension in others. But I no longer saw that as a reflection of my worth. The hardest part was letting go of the need for recognition. I had to bury the fantasy that someday they'd look at me and say, "Thank you for everything. We're sorry we called you selfish." We understand now. That kind of closure doesn't always come, not from the people we want it from, Sometimes it comes from within, like a breath you didn't realize you were holding finally being released. One evening, I sat with Miguel on the back steps, the sun slipping beneath the horizon in slow, molten streaks. He was telling me about a science project, his hands flying through the air as he tried to explain the experiment. His asthma didn't slow him down anymore. His sentences came easily. I smiled as I watched him, this little boy I had once carried, through hospital corridors, now growing into himself with a lightness I had never known as a child. "Are you happy?" he asked suddenly, peering up at me. The question caught me off guard. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Are you tired?" But, "Are you happy?" I thought about it, about everything I had lost and everything I had started to reclaim. "I think I'm learning how to be," I said. That night, I took out my old acceptance letter one last time. The paper had yellowed slightly, the edges worn from being handled too often. I held it in my hands, read it over slowly, and finally folded it back into its envelope. Then I placed it in a box along with the first short story I'd finished, a few of my old school notebooks, and a printout of my new college schedule. Not to forget, but to honor. To mark that it wasn't the end of a dream, but the long, winding, painful, beautiful path back to it. I'll never be the girl who left for college straight out of high school with a suitcase full of bright clothes and unshattered illusions. But I am the woman who stayed, who bore the weight, who broke and rebuilt, and who, against all odds, never let go of herself entirely. Let them think I'm selfish. Let them misremember, misjudge, misunderstand. Because I know the truth. I know what it costs to stay, and I know what it means to rise again, slowly, quietly, without applause, and that is enough. That has always been enough.